Okay, so I tried a live stream earlier and it kept breaking up, so I'm going to do a video and upload. And let me apologize if I'm goofy. Let me see if I can lift my leg and show you guys. Took a fall, did something to my knee. So I am all goofy, iced, but it's all good because we got semi-nutritious snacks and Diet Coke. So I'm just going to go with this. I'm going to ramble. I'm Suzanne Titkemeyer. I used to write a column called No Longer Quivering for Pathos for over 10 years. The column dealt with the evangelical world, the very same evangelical world that was seen in the documentary Shiny Happy People. And I had feelings, definite feelings about part one and part two. So now I'm going to do three and four and other things. I was talking to Bliss Chris too earlier, also, just a tiny bit about what we have going on here, and I have to talk about that too. Okay. I don't look great. I don't look great in hazy gray light because of this weather situation. Okay. Don't bully anybody I'm going to talk about. Don't send hate. If you're a Duggar fan or a Katie Joy fan coming here, I will mock you if you post. I will mock you hard because I have no patience with people who put up with abusers. It's just where my line is. And a lot of it is this big whole interconnected thing today that's just so goofy. First, let me start with the stuff going on here that I was trying to talk to Bliss about. Bliss Chris. I'm in Maryland. I'm in rural, well, not rural Maryland. I'm in suburban Maryland, 10 miles out of D.C. 10 miles from the D.C. line. And we are beyond the red zone. I've looked at some maps. Some have it brown, some have it purple, some have it maroon. But we are at the highest level of pollution, so I'm really struggling with my asthma as a result. I'm staying in. I'm staying inside. I'm staying inside. I'm cuddling up on the sofa with Kifa and crocheting. So all of this plays into this. This is awful right now here, so we're hoping it lifts so that we can go outside. As it is now, I can't even go in the sunroom because of the smoke. So I finally had the chance to watch episodes 3 and 4 of Shiny Happy People. And the uneven tone got a little bit better, but is still just shallowly looking at something that deserves looking at in depth. And when I get back home to Costa Rica, I'm going to rewatch the series. I'm going to pick it apart point by point to do an in-depth look at the things they're talking about. If you saw the other day, you know I did a thing on blanket training. Somebody made a comment that they thought Michelle Duggar always looked gleeful when talking about blanket training. I agree. So if you haven't watched my blanket training video, go back and watch it. I only covered small babies and the first beginnings of doing blanket training. Because to me, the beginning is the most horrific. What they order you to do to babies, starting as young as 2 to 4 months, and then going on to toddlerhood, it's the worst advice I've ever seen. It's quite abusive. So the thing that struck me the most watching 3 and 4 is we saw the very beginnings, the roots of Christian nationalism in Bill Gothard's IBLP. When he had the Alert Academy, he had all these different academies and such, and he had teenage boys dressed up like military and law enforcement, just very militant, militaristic type things, marching around. At least they weren't goose stepping, but I think it'd be a short jump from that. But I think that the worst of the worst of what we're seeing right now in good Christian nationalism has its roots in that. They are part of the problem. They were part of the problem. And it just makes me sick seeing where we are now as a nation and all the things that have happened with the nationalism. It's not good. It's also rooted in white supremacy. There are a lot of these Christian nationalist groups that are racist. So I think that they all play into that too. I saw very few people in my old quiverful life that had anything to do with the IBLP that were people of color. They just didn't exist in that world. There were a few, there were outliers like Vody Bauckham. Bauckham Sock'em Robots. That's the only way I can remember to how to say his last name, because I never had anything to do with Vody. I had heard of him and seen some of his sermons, but I had never gone to any conference featuring him. Cindy Kunzman, my friend, was the one that's really, really up on that, who'd seen Vody. And Vody kept talking about suing her. So we've got the white nationalism. The other thing that struck me that I laughed about was all the good Christian, or what do you call them? Cultural enforcers is what we used to say at No Longer Quivering. They're calling them influencers on the documentary. Well, they all thought that they were going to get the hero edit, and they all didn't. They got the goat edit. And the mildest goat edit I've ever seen. And they're all complaining about it. Paul and Morgan have been doing video after video, whining and crying and carrying on about the edit they got on Shiny Happy People. Girl defined. Bethany and Kristen. Kristen, I've not had a lot to do with, but Bethany has attacked No Longer Quivering and Vicky Garrison several times and exposed her own little ignorance. I watch some of Bethy's videos and things. She's upset. There are others that were mentioned that were upset, but they don't understand that was like the mildest thing in the world. And for Morgan and Paul to say, well, they were in our house half a day and they only used 2 seconds of us or something. I'm going to say the same thing I said to and about Katie Joy, KJ. When you film for a documentary, you can sign all the release paperwork. They can tell you whatever the hell they want. But the reality is that you have zero control over how they portray you. They will use however little or much of your filming that they want, with the specific goal of promoting whatever viewpoint they want. The narrative, as some of the weirder people have said. The narrative, your narrative. Okay. So you have no control over that. That is a problem when you open yourselves up to these documentaries. You know, I did like 6 of them in the last 2 years, filmed for it, always ended up on the cutting room floor. The project did not get made. And so I've kind of realized this is something I don't want to be involved with, because I don't want my own words twisted. I don't want to be portrayed any way but how I am. And that's always very important to me, to be heard and to be understood, and doesn't necessarily happen. Oh, so I'm reminded back to when before I started doing it at LQ, when I was still at my old Fundy Town church, and I was on the tines of leaving. I was approached by one of those shows where they swap housewives, they swap mothers and families, and at the end, if you do what they want, you get a prize. I was approached by those folks. We did an audition reel that they requested. They said, would you do a reel of your family? So we did that. We sent that in. Then they mailed me the contract, and I was looking at the contract, and the restrictions were such that I just told my husband, I said, we are not signing this. We are not signing this. It was bad all the way around. And it wouldn't have done us any good, even if we'd have gotten the $50,000 or however much it was that they were offering at the time. So we bowed out of that. I'm realizing that with documentaries, especially if you're not sure what direction they're going to be taking, they're going to be filming you left and right, that's probably a good policy to do as well. If you don't want to be exposed for who you are and what you are, it's better to just bow out, take any part of it. If you really don't want them twisting your words and twisting who you are, do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Just bow out of it, because once they film you, you have no control over what they do with that film. None whatsoever once you've signed the release form. So that's my rant about that. Paul and Morgan, they're pretty silly. Every one of the people they showed are pretty silly. I laughed hard at Brittany Dawn, or as they call her at Funny Snark at Reddit, Bidong, because they used a clip of her, like a few second clip, and she was upset. She said that she did not give them permission, that she knew nothing about it. I did laugh hard when they showed a clip of Jill Rodriguez, one of our least favorite Quiverful Mamas. They showed that, and I just busted out laughing. Jill is a whole pile of ridiculousness. I recommend, if you want to know more about her, to look at Fundy Snark at Reddit. I don't post there, but I frequently read. And sometimes they give you some things to think about. Sometimes they just put up ridiculous photos of the Rodriguezes and um, the Collins family, Carissa Collins. So all these influencers ended up with little clips in the project, and it was pretty good. I think that the uneven tone of the documentary series had straightened itself out by the end of, certainly by midpoint or end of episode 2. Episode 3 and 4 I thought were better. The whole series is, as a whole, is rather shallow. But then again, we're talking a tiny amount of time to compress a whole lot of information into. Okay, so this brings me to my next topic. Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson, star of the 700 Club. He had his own ministry in Virginia Beach. I've been down to that ministry a few times myself. Hotel. There's a university, a law school, all of that down there in Virginia Beach, including a huge conference center. I used to go down for the Toronto Airport Christian Fellowship conferences they would hold around Valentine's Day at that conference, and I loved it. I loved it, loved it, loved it. But I was a different person back then. That was the same thing I want to say when we were approached about the television show. I was a different person entirely then. I was submitting and smiling and a shiny, happy person. Except around my girlfriends, where I was like, I hate this. Um, so Pat Robertson died. I have mixed feelings. I used to love the 700 Club when I was a card carrying member of Funky Town. And once I left, I started to see the spin that the show put on various news items. I started to see stuff that I didn't really care for much. And eventually it did come out that Pat Robertson was using his ministry for all kinds of stuff he wasn't supposed to use it for. He was using it for things like he had imported mining equipment, gold mining equipment for a Congolese dictator. Pat Robertson owned mines in Africa. He owned gold diamond mines in Africa. And researching that is why I am rather anti-diamond now. I have committed not to buy diamonds or any other jewel that is mined that way, because even in Pat's mind, it's young kids that are going out there doing this mining. And there's so many hazards and dangers. They're using hazardous chemicals, equipment, all of that. So with Pat and the Congolese dictator, what happened was he used the cover of his Operation Blessings ministry to import this gold extraction equipment for the dictator. And that violated like a pile of laws. You're not allowed to use something charitable to do something to make money. And it's pretty much a type of corruption and extortion he should have gone to jail for. But what happened is the Attorney General of Virginia at the time was a friend of Pat's, and while prosecutors were saying we have to go after this guy and put him in jail for this stuff, his buddy declined to prosecute him. And it was kind of weird too, because I keep hearing stuff about Pat through the years and seeing him, how he got to start at places like with Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. Apparently, he really screwed him over having to do with CBN. I don't know. I just know what they say. And there was a part about that in Tammy Faye Baker's the movie that came out last year about her, and that was an interesting film. If you ever want to see it, it's just take it with a grain of salt, because like this documentary series, not everything was 100%, and sometimes they don't have time enough to go over everything like that. So still good. And I still recommend this documentary series very highly, unless you've moved on and you don't want to be triggered. If you don't want to be triggered and you've moved on past all this nonsense, do not watch, because all it's going to do is put you back in that frame of mind or that thing you were doing when all of this was going down. So I don't recommend it if you're trying to keep from being triggered. And I knew it was going to be hard to watch. I knew it was going to be triggering for myself, and sure enough, it was. But it's been good in one thing. It's really raised up some new stories, some new details that I did not remember when I was writing my book. I don't know them now, and it's like, oh my goodness. Okay, I'm gonna go because I know my drug-addled self is starting to ramble hard. Have a really great rest of your week. If you're here on the East Coast, stay inside. Don't go outside. It's brutal out there. I had to go to CVS earlier, and even with the N95 mask, it was brutal. Oh, so in the photo I used at the beginning of this, my screen cap, I took that on Tuesday evening in Warrenton, Virginia. We were going through drive-through at Wendy's, and I told my husband, I said, look at the moon. We must be going through smoke, because the moon had that. I mean, not the moon. What am I saying? I'm really addled. The sun. It was the sun. It was the sun setting, not the moon coming up. And when I've seen that in Costa Rica, when I've seen an orange red moon, a sun, moon, whatever, it's always been over the cane fields. When they start burning the cane fields, you have the red sun or the red moon coming through the smoke. And when I saw that, it was distinctive. I said, that's smoke. We're coming through smoke. And that was before I had even looked at the weather. So I'm staying inside, and I would recommend you do the same until this thing passes. If you're somewhere else in the U.S. or the world, lucky. You're lucky, lucky, lucky. I have things to talk about next week, too, and maybe later in the week. I'm really shocked at the prices and things here in the States. There's some things that have distinctly shifted even from the last time I was here in suburban Maryland. I'm kind of pissed off about all this smoke, because I wanted to go to some of the Maryland parks that I have not had a chance to visit, like Melrose Bay. It's where there are a lot of abandoned U.S. ships. It's like a ship graveyard. I wanted to go to that. There are other places I wanted to go. I wanted to go back to Quiet Waters Park where my daughter got married and take a look around again, because it was the most beautiful place you'd ever laid eyes on. So many beautiful places in Maryland, and I wanted to go bar hopping in Baltimore. Do all the fun stuff that I absolutely love, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Too much smoke. And Monday I fly back to Costa Rica by myself. That's what this little rollator thing is all about. I broke down and I got not a walker, but a rollator, one with 4 wheels. It's turquoise. And this will allow me to not use a wheelchair when I'm in the airport. because there's nothing really I've come to hate more than being pulled around like a sack of potatoes from place to place to place. I told my husband, I said, as soon as we get to the States, I'm buying one of the rolling walkers because my problem is balance, and I found this thing is great. I can just grab the handles and walk all day. Okay, so I'm gonna really go this time. You guys have a great day. I'll catch up with you later on down the road. Thank you for watching. Thank you for putting with this rambling.